Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar. We're excited about this topic in which we'll look into how employers can address fertility treatment needs and family forming concerns for all of their employees, regardless of gender. Before we get started, I want to share something special we have for today's attendees. One of our monthly virtual conferences is coming up on Wednesday, April 6th, and it's titled Managing the Human Impact of Digital Transformation. It's going to be particularly valuable for employers who are transitioning to new digital tools and monitoring the varied and influential effect that this has on employees. Thanks to our partners, including today's sponsor, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who joined today's webinar, and that will be you. I'm putting a link in the chat space right now, and you'll want to take advantage of this one. The regular price for our conference tickets is $149, and this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. Today, we'll be exploring the topic, the next step for fertility benefits, covering all genders. Conversations around fertility benefits usually focus on addressing female infertility. While that is a critical piece of the puzzle, people of all genders need support from family forming resources. In about 30% of different sex couples experiencing infertility, male factor issues are the primary cause. Trans and non-binary people may have specific fertility needs, but struggle to find physicians who have the right experience. We'll explore how companies can provide inclusive fertility benefits that cover all genders and ages in 2022, and why inclusive benefits are so important to today's workforce and job seekers. Our sponsor today is Carrot. I'll tell you a bit about them. Carrot Fertility is the leading global fertility benefits provider for employers, built to make fertility care and family forming accessible and affordable to anyone who wants or needs it, regardless of age, race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or geography. Now, a few quick logistical items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from both the Society of Human Resource Management and the HR Certification Institute. You can also look out for a written account of the conversation on our website at fromdayone.co. Now, for the audience, about 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll take your questions. You can submit your questions anytime they occur to you using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Anna Maltby. Anna is an editor, editorial consultant, and content strategist. Over the course of her award-winning career, she has served in leadership roles at several publications, including as deputy editor of Real Simple, deputy editor of Refinery 29, and most recently, executive editor of Elemental, the health and wellness publication on the Medium platform. Earlier in her career, she was a reporter at Men's Health, so she has covered the health of more than one gender. So, okay, Anna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited about our conversation. I want to just jump right in and let each of our panelists introduce themselves and give a quick note about their work in this specific space. We have kind of a big panel and limited time, so let's maybe keep it to an elevator pitch if possible. You all have such spectacular resumes, so I know that'll be a challenge, but I'd love to throw it to Brooke first to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks so much. Well, good afternoon. My name is Brooke Quinn. I am Chief Customer Officer for Carrot Fertility. And really what that means is that at the end of the day, I am ultimately accountable for driving delight for both our customers and our members, and have responsibility for all of our operational teams that are responsible for those journeys. So really excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Brooke. And Tammy, I'd love to throw it to you next.
Sure, thank you. I'm Tammy Fennessy. I'm the Director of Benefits at American Eagle Outfitters, based out of Pittsburgh, PA. And yeah, I've been very passionate about this space since probably around like 2018 was when I started really taking a lot of notice of this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Dr. Edwards Dunn, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stacy Dunn. I am the founder and president of Fertility for Colored Girls, the national organization for Black women and couples who struggle with infertility, miscarriage, and loss. I also serve as the executive pastor of one of the largest African-American churches in Chicago, Illinois, the Trinity United Church of Christ. And so I'm honored to be a part of this panel.
Thank you so much. And John, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is John Waltman. I am a fertility patient first, but I've been a spokesperson for the cause for almost a decade now. And in 2021, I published a book, Swimming Aimlessly, which talks about how getting men to talk about and deal with their infertility woes.
Great. And Alida?
Alida Dover, I head the benefits function for Integer Holdings Corporation.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Dr. Knopman.
Hi, I'm Jaime Knopman. I am the Director of Fertility Preservation at CCRM New York. And I spend most of my days counseling couples on infertility and individuals on fertility preservation, whether it be egg freezing or embryo freezing or something of that nature. And I have had the privilege of working with all types of families for the majority of my career, which is incredibly rewarding. And now that there are organizations like Carrot and other fertility benefits, more and more couples and individuals are able to access the benefits and create the families that they want. So it's sort of a beautiful experience to be in my role.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. I think I hit everyone up, but please holler if I didn't. Just to get into some questions, I mean, I think first for those who maybe haven't like dipped a toe into the world of fertility and infertility, I'd love for us to just establish a little bit about the basics. Like, how common is the need among just the general population for fertility testing and treatment? And then for those who maybe don't have these kinds of benefits from an employer, like how much does that kind of thing cost? What does that look like? Maybe Dr. Knopman, we can start with you as the practitioner here.
Yeah. So I was going to say fertility, or infertility is very common. Unfortunately, I think it's been a taboo subject where couples and individuals don't talk about it. Although now I always say I hate to credit social media with too much, but I think social media has really driven this home and people are sharing it more. I would also say I have seen major shifts in the access of benefits and what patients are doing in the past 2 to 3 years. And I think a lot of this is not only like social media driven, but pandemic driven, right? So we've seen a huge increase in individuals coming in to freeze their eggs given the pandemic, or freeze embryos given the pandemic. And one of the most amazing things about organizations that provide fertility benefits is women or couples or individuals can do treatment at younger ages when the quality of their gametes, egg, sperm, embryo are much higher. So the chances of the gametes working are significantly greater, right? So it's like you're actually providing care that will help a patient down the road. So I would say, we're very busy. We see lots and lots of couples and individuals. And now that word is out there, people can shape the family they want, whether it's a single mother by choice or same-sex male couple. Gestational surrogacy or gestational carriers legal now in the state of New York. So that's been something we're seeing all the time. And yeah, the need is definitely there.
Thank you. And maybe Dr. Edwards Dunn or Brooke, kind of on the cost perspective, like how expensive is this outside of, a covered kind of situation?
Yeah, happy to. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Did you want to start?
You can go first and I'll close it. We'll tag team. You go.
Okay. That sounds great. Perfect. I think dependent on what journey and path to parenthood you are exploring, the costs vary. So, a standard IVF cycle is about $21,600 currently. Obviously that changes. For a gestational carrier, it's close to $130,000 on average. Adoption is anywhere between $50,000 to $60,000. And I think, where Carrot Fertility really comes in hand is that it's really approaching it from a 3-pronged strategy. And that's, financial, it's emotional support, and it's providing benefit and resources during that journey. And I think, just like we just heard, it's a pretty common problem. 1 in 8 people are impacted by infertility. And I think the other thing that's becoming more normalized in the conversation is that it's not just female infertility. And I think normalizing that conversation and to really talk about the fact that it's both female and male infertility and addressing it from both of those angles is critically important.
And to add on to Dr. Knopman and Brooke, from a statistics standpoint, statistics state that 7.3 million women and couples struggle with infertility. And for me, particularly where I stand from Fertility for Colored Girls, African-American women and couples struggle at 2 times the rate as our Caucasian brothers and sisters. And often people do not realize it because people think that within the African-American community, Black men and women are hyperfertile. But the reality is that Black men and women are struggling with infertility, both men and women, as Brooke just stated, because men usually comprise of 50% of the cases of couples or individuals who struggle with infertility. And so I think that that's very important for us to consider. And, Brooke already shared with you as far as the expenses as it pertains to fertility treatment or pathways to parenthood. And the reality is that whether it's a path or someone seeking to to preserve their fertility, reality is that it can be expensive. It's lofty when people are struggling just simply to pay their rent and their mortgage. And so it becomes essential that organizations provide support and benefits for those. And I also like to tag on as well, we talk about infertility as far as men and women and couples in LGBTQ building families. I think that we also have to consider individuals who have experienced miscarriage and loss and stillbirth as well. These things become, and then as Brooke also brought up, adoption as well. So all of this, when we look at fertility and reproductive health, we have to look at it from the balcony, from a holistic perspective, so that we can meet the needs across the board, regardless of age, gender, and ethnicity.
Thank you so much for that. Such important points. And I'd love to just build on that a little bit in terms of, the covering all genders, sort of the topic of this webinar. When we say gender inclusive fertility benefits or gender inclusive approaches to fertility, like, what do we mean? Can we kind of spell it out? How have certain groups been left behind, or certain types of couples or certain people been left behind in sort of the traditional conversations around fertility? Maybe I'll start with John as our sort of like male representative here, and we can expand from there.
So, and I'm going to take us back a couple decades in this respect, because men have been largely ignored in this whole fertility equation. When you look at how long we've had fertility treatments and exploration on the female side, and how we've had the first IVF baby about 40 years ago, you're comparing it to, it was only been in the last few years that there's really been more investigation into the causes of male infertility. You're looking at sperm counts dropping across the board. You're looking at men who are desperate to find out why their sperm count is low, why they have a low motility, why they have a low morphology, without any real solutions. One of the doctors that I was talking to during the writing of my book expressed that she was talking with one associate who said that men simply don't like to be examined down there, so why do anything? Reality is, whenever I've spoken to a male who's in a situation where they are talking about male factor infertility, they'll say, do whatever you need. Poke, prick, cut, do whatever it is that it'll take in order to get a solution for my family. Even when we were going through our struggles, I had a lower morphology rate, and there was really no solution that was offered. I had to go to a couple of traditional Chinese medical pieces. There's some overall health things that I did, like cutting out some of the fattier burgers and things like that, getting a little bit more exercise in, but there wasn't a supplement that was recommended. There wasn't, a lot of some of the practices that women go through on their side. So I think that there's Men are really left out of the equation in that respect. And then as well on the emotional side, with there being a lot of support groups on Facebook through groups like Resolve, but at the time there really weren't a lot that were male specific. Thankfully now, however many years later, those areas are starting to improve, and you're starting to see more men offer support and come out with their stories, but it's still nowhere close to where it is for women.
Thank you.
I also,
Oh,
sorry
yeah.
to cut you off. I was going to say, I also think in general, like when infertility comes from women, or we call female factor, women are more likely, or at this point, more comfortable opening up about it, right? Like there's more support groups. It's sort of in a weird way, like, I don't know, it's almost like acceptable. I always think of it as like breast cancer. So if a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, she's pretty comfortable talking about it. There's a lot of support groups, but like male breast cancer, it's less, I don't want to say it's taboo, but it's less talked about. And I think the same thing happens in the world of infertility, in that men are less likely to sort of find these support groups, community where discussions are had and support is identified. So I've always sort of felt like it is more challenging, not only because sometimes there's not as much to do in terms of diagnosis or treatment, but because there's less support around it. And so I think men feel more isolated. And in some ways, I think men feel almost demasculinized when we say, oh, it's sperm related, right? So it becomes this somewhat like difficult conversation to have.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. And I had that experience. I really had nowhere to turn. When you start with a male culture where traditionally you're just told to rub some dirt on it, get back in the game, be the rock for your family, you don't really, you're sort of told to put your emotions to the side. I had at the very start of everything, you're looking at that stereotype, and you're looking at this culture that has been developed over decades and generations of men having trouble talking about anything that isn't a superficial topic, sports, work, renovations, that kind of thing. So it's really a cultural shift that is thankfully starting to occur, but it is something that took way too long. And I mean, we were in the deepest parts of our infertility journey only a decade ago. So you're looking at only something that's changing within the last 5 to 6 years.
And I'd like to add that, again, I think traditionally the focus has been on the women. Even when we look from a biblical perspective throughout the biblical text, you don't find anywhere that in any scripture that they say a man struggled with infertility. All the women throughout the biblical text, it was Hannah, it was Elizabeth. Well, how do we know that it wasn't their husband struggling with, fertility challenges? And so even from a spiritual perspective and how that informs our day-to-day lives, and inform, I think that there's an impact there. And so when we think about inclusivity, again, thinking about inclusivity, not only from a male and female perspective, but again, talking about it from an LGBTQ perspective and talking about it from an ethnicity perspective. Because the reality is that even when we begin to look at many fertility clinics, most fertility clinics, the marketing was really toward white women. And so really making sure that the marketing, our websites, all of those things, the conversations that we're having, the space is hospitable toward everyone, male and female, regardless of gender or a sexual orientation, and also ethnicity, so that people can see themselves when they come into those places. Fertility for Colored Girls, we offer support groups for not only women, but also men as well. We have a safe space for men, but also in our support groups, men can also come to those meetings with, if they're married, if it's a heterosexual relationship or whatever it may be, they can come to those meetings as well. So normalizing those conversations and also ensuring that our marketing, so that people can see themselves when they come into those clinics, but also, as a part of our organizations as well.
Absolutely. I'm just going to jump in on that point. And Doctor, one of the pieces that comes to mind for me is that when you look at, whether we intend to or not, we often look to celebrity as the role models for us. And you're seeing that more often in women. And you've seen that, for example, with Gabrielle Union. You've seen that with Michelle Obama talking about it. You haven't seen Dwayne Wade, you haven't seen Barack Obama talk about it. You haven't seen a lot of men in general opening up about their struggles. There have been a couple isolated cases in Canada. One of the examples is Jason Strudwick, former member of the Edmonton Oilers, now a broadcaster in Edmonton. He came out with his story. There was a British comedian whose name is escaping me currently, but still, these are very isolated, very small conversations. You know, you're not having the mega star like you had a Kim Kardashian talking about her issues that has been able to reach out. You know, if you had the likes of an NBA superstar or a movie, an actor or a singer, regardless of gender, if you had that role model that you could point to from any community, it would do so much to open up the conversations. And quite frankly, in the heterosexual and the homosexual communities as well. If you had, you know, we see the examples of women who are adopting or having a surrogate, etc. But you don't see that in the homosexual male community about how they bring a baby. The only example that comes to mind is Ashton Cooper, but he still has not done a lot to tell the full story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I do want to move us on a little bit onto sort of the employer and the benefit side of things, especially for maybe Alita and Tammy to weigh in on this one, but definitely want to open it up to anyone. You know, I think Dr. Knopman and Brooke mentioned, you know, fertility coverage is becoming more common, more popular. Especially in the last couple of years, it feels like workers are really asking for it more. I'd love to hear from your perspective kind of on the employer side about how that shift has played out for you and what do employers really need to know about this sort of need and desire for fertility coverage?
I could kick that off. One of the things at Integer is when we were looking at our benefits and our summary plan descriptions, it referred to a husband and a wife and a male and a female, and that did not appear fair to me and equitable. And I had that same discussion with my leadership. And so what we did is we removed those requirements for coverage. We had for infertility coverage, but you had to be a male, female, married couple. And so we removed all that. So it does not no longer matters if you are married, if you're male and female, if you're a single person, because those are artificial barriers to parenthood and needless. So we did remove those. And it was a fairness issue. It was do the right thing. The second thing was just offering infertility coverage. It's appropriate. It's market-based. It is sometimes a difficult sell at the executive level because they tend to want to stay out of people's personal lives, particularly before the market became more labor friendly. It was just also an uncomfortable conversation. I mean, let's just be straight about it, right? Because again, I'm talking about people's personal life and I don't want to overstep. But if you position these changes as a fairness, we want everyone to have the same opportunities and the same benefits. It really does go a long way with those employees who are struggling with infertility. Tammy?
Yep, I can go ahead and chime in now for sure. I went on kind of a similar type of journey. Like I said, I started kind of peeling back the onion around 2018. I don't know why. I just recall that was kind of the year that I was being approached by some of our female employees. So it was more of like from an equity standpoint at that time frame where they were running into financial barriers. And, we were having conversations around our claims and things like that. We had some very complicated pregnancies that had happened that year that were just really extremely sad and difficult for parents to deal with that were impacted. And, kind of it got our wheels turning into, again, like what she was saying, and looking at our plan descriptions. And what I think I learned very quickly was same thing that she did, that it's not equitable, and men weren't included at all. An infertile man had zero coverage. And, based on our culture at American Eagle, and we're an inclusive company. Our I&D efforts have definitely, been going on for many years, and it was not culturally, and every part of me was kind of screaming like, wow, this is not right. And so we started, immediately looking at what solutions we could put into place to support parents in any way you wanted to become a parent. It didn't matter, again, if you're from the LGBTQ plus, side of the world, and you're in a, female-female relationship, male-male, transgender. We really started leaning into everything, and wanted to take away the cost barriers at the same time. I think, if you don't have insurance, I don't know how people manage this. I don't know how they could possibly afford it. But we wanted to make sure that anybody, at least that was on our insurance, had a viable opportunity, not only to get fertility benefits, but to be able to get them and stretch those benefits as far as they could, not waste all of their, their dollars, which is in the traditional plan. You waste most of your dollars proving that you're infertile. And then by the time you actually can get to treatment, you have nothing left. So that's, and I could totally relate to, why people would go for multiple embryos and everything else, because that's your one shot. And, in a lot of people's lives, that's it. It's a one and done. And we wanted to remove that. We wanted to be able to offer any opportunity we could, as many opportunities as we could, for those, folks to have healthy babies.
And just saying, on the heels of that, what's so incredible about Carrot or, Progeny, Maven, those type of fertility benefits is that the regular insurance companies, and I'm not here to knock them, but they have a lot of restrictions that same-sex couples, male, female, transgender, cannot access, because they say, I have a same-sex female couple and they say they're not infertile, but I'm like, of course they're infertile. They don't have the opposite gamete. And they're like, well, they need to try for 6 months or a year. I'm like, but how are they going to do that? That makes absolutely no sense to me. And so it's really unfair for that population. So what's amazing about a Carrot is they're sort of like, here's your, X $1,000, whatever you need to do, go and do it. They're not here saying, do lesser before greater, show us this test, show us that test. Now, yes, us as the physicians, we have to be responsible, right? Like, we can't tell people to do things that are irresponsible just because they have the benefit. But at the same time, if you have the benefit, we can help you use it best so that you do what you need to do to build your family, as opposed to just doing what the insurance company tells you that they want you to do.
I think you're absolutely right. And with insurance companies requiring a diagnosis of infertility, that really only addresses male, female couples. And it's usually a 6 month to a 1 year requirement. And I think what a benefit like Carrot provides is really optionality, whether you're a same-sex couple or you're a single intending parent who wants to create optionality in maybe forming a family down the road. The point that was just illustrated, it's a benefit that's offered that leaves the choices and the decisions in your hands on how you want to navigate that path and journey.
Thank you so much for that. One thing I'd love to hear about is, like, I kind of think the mental health element of all this, like, really needs to be discussed, because it's not just sort of this transactional medical experience, although most medical experiences have some mental health implications. But I think the journey to parenthood and experiencing roadblocks on that journey can have a real toll on people's mental health. So I'm kind of curious for just general thoughts about that. And then also just like, do employers have a role to play in that? How, like, is there a way for employers to kind of help ease that burden for their workers? And I'll just throw this to anyone who wants to jump in.
I always say, as a fertility doctor, I'm like 50% fertility doctor, 50% therapist, because these are some of the most challenging times in individuals or couples' lives, right? Like you sort of, a lot of the patients we see have been going on, life has been pretty easy or whatever it may be. And then they hit this like massive roadblock, and it's damaging not only for the individual, whether it's the female or the male patient, or like the couple starts to go through trauma. And so I always recommend that they, if, see counseling alone or see counseling with their partner, because I say like, I can only do so much for you. As we're talking, I have 2 patients texting me saying, oh my God, my pregnancy test is negative. I can't take this anymore. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like, okay, hold on, I'll call you in a little bit. Like, but I always say like, we take a day to grieve, and then we're going to pick ourselves back up, and we're going to talk about a plan for how to progress forward. But the reality is there's such a huge mental health component. And I think just like there's not enough fertility coverage for patients, we don't have enough mental health coverage for any of us, right? I mean, we all need sort of someone to talk to. So I think it's a huge component of fertility treatment. And a lot of times couples or individuals stop treatment early because they just have they don't have the fortitude to keep going because it's so emotionally taxing. And sometimes you think, oh, I wish we could help them get to that next step, because they're going to get it. They're just emotionally drained right now. They need someone to help them push forward emotionally.
I think one of the silver linings that's come out of COVID is the normalization of therapy by video. As physicians, y'all know what it's like to get someone to come into your office, right? We have that with 40% of every employer's people will not go get their basic checkup. Doesn't cost you anything. It basically doesn't hurt, and they won't do it anyway. So the availability of therapists by Zoom, like we're doing here, is, I think, really going to help us in this space with the mental health challenges, with infertility, with parenting, with all sorts of things.
And as a patient as well, I struggled with infertility, was diagnosed in 2007. So I know firsthand the mental health challenges that comes with it. Is very high. Infertility is very isolating. It can be very devastating. It's a lot of pain and tears that come with it, especially when you never ever thought in your life that you would be diagnosed with infertility. And there's so much that comes with it. As I think it was Brooke that stated it, it impacts marriage. It has impacted my marriage. And then there's, the finances that come with it. And it's so many things that, impact you mentally. I underwent 7 in vitro cycles first when I finally got pregnant with my daughter. She's 8. I just had a set of twins. They're downstairs 4 months ago as well. After 7 years of waiting and going through a whole lot of stress and trauma again, trying to get pregnant again. And so again, I think that it becomes pertinent. We have to provide holistic services, to persons struggling with infertility. So, there's the physical care as far as the medical care, but again, making sure that persons have the mental and the emotional support that they need to get through, so that they can refill, because you pour so much out as you're walking through the journey. So it becomes really, really important. So that people are strong enough to have, or the fortitude enough to have the hope and the strength to get through each aspect of what they have to go through on this journey. And so,
right.
and even from a provider perspective, I know a employer perspective, one thing that was very helpful for me at my job is that my pastor, which is my boss, was open. He too, his family has struggled with infertility, but they had an open space. Our HR space was open for us to come talk to them, for me to come talk to them about my journey, letting them know, they were fine with me going to get ultrasounds in the morning and, those types of things, or having to leave work or take time off to grieve a negative pregnancy test after IVF. And so again, making sure that those types of spaces are available for employees as well.
I think Dr. Edwards Dunn, you've just reminded me that when employees have come to me, male or female, what they've said is some version of, I can't believe I failed at something so basic. And it feels very personal, as opposed to just biologically, you didn't draw the right straw. I mean, if you didn't draw the right straw when it comes to heart disease or something like that, you think, I didn't pick my parents well. But when it comes to something like this, it's like, this is basic. How could I have failed at this? And you want it so desperately. And the emotions are extreme, for males and females. And then if you're going through any type of hormonal treatment to help you conceive, that can then, at least on the female side, I can speak to that side, it just puts exponents next to those feelings, those ups and downs, and it's exhausting, doesn't even come close.
Now,
Just to offer, just from the male side, I think at the very root of it, one thing to consider is the impact of mental health and struggles on the male brain. There's all sorts of statistics that talk about how men are impacted greater than women, how men are more likely to be suicidal than women. And certainly when I was going through our struggles and feeling those feelings of inadequacy, of not being able to do what nature intended, it impacted greatly. And I went on a downward spiral. I don't know if I'm one of the few men that will actually talk about it. And I can even point to a specific point in time where I saw an old classmate outside of a grocery store, and she asked me if I had any kids yet. She had 2, and I said I didn't. And she said, "We better catch up." You can't catch up. So even though those little things really can impact you, the one thing that I would advise is that, at least in a couple of the employers that I've had, is that they have EAPs, employee assistance programs, completely anonymous, that are through insurance providers. I've taken advantage of those in the past, and I know a number of people that have as well. That's the perfect solution for it. And it's hard for many men to, like I said before, to talk to other men, but it's also hard for men to talk to women at times about it, because the male brain just isn't wired like that. And I think that it's so essential for us to have that opportunity, to have that forum, and even, for someone in HR or LR, to just have the information from the likes of Resolve, or in Canada, Fertility Matters Canada, just to have information of the resources available is a good starting point.
thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to get into kind of the nitty gritty, if we can, of the process of, like, if your company doesn't have a fertility benefit, kind of where do you start, and how do you evaluate, and how do you center inclusivity kind of in that process? Or if you have a benefit, but it's traditional, it's only focused at sort of women in heterosexual relationships, like how do you kind of push that forward? Tammy and Alita and Brooke, I'm definitely looking at you, but again, open to anyone.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. I think, from my standpoint, I immediately started looking, at the market and, the carrots of the world, and, and really trying to just figure out the space. I think, the vendors do work differently, in the space, depending on who you're talking to. They have, some different, ways of functioning, but I think, meshing that up with your culture and your other vendor relationships to make sure that you're not being like disruptive. Like we, for instance, we ended up carving it out and having a direct contract. By doing that, we also needed to make sure, obviously, that our associates were being taken care of, that we're already going through fertility treatments. If they needed, if this was a different network. So I think all of those type of things obviously have to play in. And you always have to balance it out. You always have to make finance happy. And there is an element to that, when you're talking about healthier babies and giving people more of an opportunity, I think back to the mental health, if you're offering up a benefit where they know they have more than one opportunity, that they know they have the ability to have embryos tested to make sure that they are of the highest, genetic quality. No imperfections, giving them, again, that better chance to have a successful pregnancy or a successful child. It just takes, I think, that stress away, to a point where it can give people more options and more opportunity to do the right thing. And, it does decrease also the ability, well, not the ability, but the want for people to have more than one child at a time, to go through, the multiple embryos. We have, like, the vast majority of the people we're seeing coming through our plan, all of them, for the most part, are going through having single embryos, singletons, versus multiples, which to me says they're feeling more confident. They're not, they're willing to, maybe go through this more than once, if that's what it takes. But yeah, I think, so from the financial standpoint, reduction in NICU claims, reduction in, multiples, reduction in the fact that you may only, you might have one miscarriage versus 2 or 3 before becoming a parent. I think all of those things add up, and not just in dollars, but the quality of life and how you care about your people, building a strong culture.
Tammy's
It's
absolutely
a
right.
continuum.
And I was just going to say, as of April 2021, there's 19 states that actually have mandates around having some level of coverage for infertility. But as we've talked about today, when you have an infertility diagnosis, it's very specific to male, female, and it's usually a 6-month minimum requirement. And so I think when companies are approaching thinking about fertility benefits and the offering, I think it's really going back to that word of inclusivity, because there's so many different paths, whether it's LGBTQ+ and supporting that employee demographic through adoption, surrogacy, preservation, and really making sure that the benefit is really going to help address family forming across your entire employee workforce. And I think the one piece that we haven't talked about today that I do think is really important as well is focusing on that age inclusivity as well, because even outside of family forming, there's issues related to low testosterone, there's issues related to menopause, and these journeys that are really relative for hormonal health are prevalent. And talk about taboo, really not talked about, probably talked about less than even infertility. And so, one of the things that we're really proud of at Carrot is really our extension into providing age inclusive benefits with a focus on low T and menopause, which will be available next year for our members and customers. But again, I think it goes back to really addressing it from an inclusive perspective and making sure that you're not just looking at an infertility diagnosis.
From the employer perspective, just to build on what Tammy said, it's a continuum. And I think what you do is you have to start somewhere. So if you think it's very difficult to get management to buy into from nothing to a platinum program. And I don't care whether we're talking infertility or knee replacement. So what you do is you go to the benchmarking, you find that at a minimum you need to offer this. And so that's what you put in, and then you build upon that. And you build that off of your values, but you also have a good actuary that just will say, being inclusive will cost you this much money. And when you can show that it's 0.001 in terms of cost, and it's, because they're seeing these huge dollar signs because they're thinking, it's $20,000, $22,000 per IVF, blah, blah. When you can say, okay, it's this much money, that puts everything in perspective, and it's speaking their language, because at the end of the day, that's where we get the approvals from. And if you don't speak their language of what is this going to cost and what do I get out of it, the answer is going to be no.
I love what you
But I
just said
realize
about.
that sounds harsh to this audience, which is, we're very much people and helping people to be their best selves and have what they want. But that's the check on, that's the people who let us do what we do.
I love what you just said about building on it too, because we definitely didn't go all in the beginning either. We had to step step our way up. And since then, we've been able to offer like cryopreservation for any, medically necessary conditions. We've been able to, including those, who are going through, transgender surgeries and therapies. We've been able to add in adoption reimbursement, surrogacy reimbursement. We've revamped our bereavement policy to include miscarriage leave, and I think, the more and more you lean into this space and the more people you talk to that it's affecting, the more you learn about what you need to be doing.
Thank you so much. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So I want to jump into questions because we've gotten some really great questions from our audience. Probably not enough time to answer all of them, but certainly add another one in the Q&A box if you do have one. The first one is actually just about how Carrot actually works. So I think that's a great place to start. Brooke, so how does it work? Is it a supplement to insurance? What do you know? What do we need to know about it?
So great question. Carrot is a fully inclusive fertility benefit. And we really partner with employers to customize a fertility benefit plan that focuses on access to care, financial benefits, and also that emotional support benefit as well, because it's not just offering a financial benefit, it's providing access to care and resources to really impact that entire journey. We do work in tandem with insurance companies as it relates to deductibles and ensuring that we are tracking benefits from a tax perspective as well.
Thank you so much. And there's a great question, I think probably for Alita, that says, how did that process go when it comes to removing the heteronormative barriers for fertility coverage on insurance? If we're a small organization, our benefits plans tend to be out of a box and not very malleable.
That's interesting. We are a self-insured plan, so I could make that change unilaterally because we are. But my carrier was one of the national carriers, and I'm national accounts, and I called them up and I said, please tell me this is not your standard language. And they said, oh, it is. And I said, it's 2020. You've got to be kidding me. And so me pushing them is actually pushing this carrier, who's one of the largest, to change their language. I'm an 8,000 person company, right? I'm not an AT&T, which is where I would expect some of that to come from. So I also think, and I've seen changes. It's from people like Tammy and I who read the SPDs. A lot of people don't. And then just identify that is not appropriate. So if you're a small company, say, do you have inclusive language? What would that look like? And the other thing that is key is you do need the support of your manager. And I have the support of my manager. I said, this isn't fair. This isn't right. And he said, you're right, it's not. And fairness is one of the key values at Integer, doing the right thing. And so when I tapped into that's not fair, I had other advocates with me.
On that
and then I closed the deal with how little it would cost.
Sure.
We're talking about this much money. So that would be my advice to you.
Yeah. And just on that note, something that
I was just going to add to Alita's comment. I think when you talk about how little the cost is for the benefit in comparison to one NICU visit or one unmanaged pregnancy or multiple embryo transfer, the variance in the cost is pretty significant.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that in addition to that, in as much as we're talking about family planning and family building, we're also talking about staff morale as well, right? And so the happier and more valued our employees feel, the more likely they are to, they will do anything for, the company where they feel valued and they are happy. And so I think it's very important for us to remember that. And you can't put a price tag on that as far as the morale, and the happiness of an employee, and a good employee, right? That is serving the company well. And so I think, again, you have to look at it holistically and not just, and even though I know companies are about the bottom line and the dollar, but the reality is that you can't always put a dollar price tag on the value and the happiness and the importance of an employee, and especially one that serves you well. Because these employees will also go somewhere else and get where they can get the resources that they need so that they can build their family if this particular organization is not supporting them. I should say that because I've seen that happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that's important now is employee engagement, and that's a holistic thing. It's encompasses benefits, how your manager treats you, and this would very much be a part of that because it's a benefit plan. It basically says, do you value me as a person, regardless of what my difference happens to be? And this is just one part of it, but I don't want a benefit plan to be the reason that you leave Integer or you don't choose us in the first place.
Another question came in about privacy. It says, do some employees working with fertility benefits have issues with privacy? They're asked to divulge a lot of information.
That really stays outside my benefit. So as a benefits person, I know what I need to know, and I don't need to be in that level of detail. So the short version is no. If you choose to disclose to me, that's one thing. If you don't need to talk to me about any of it. I have found that people do come talk to me because, according to my husband, I'm overly helpful, and say, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and here's what your choices are, but I can't tell you what to do. I can give you options, but your heart needs to tell you what to do. I can tell you what's available, how to get there, what the roadmap is, but you have to pick the path.
Yeah, I like you, Alita. I've had definitely people who have come to my office, that want to talk it out and find out what benefits we have and stuff like that. But they don't get into like too much, that's like overly private. That's not the help that I'm there, to really provide. I'm not an expert in this space, but I can guide them to the right resources. And I think having, patient care advocates and stuff like that that are in that space with these vendors, that's the space where they let it all out.
Exactly. I mean, because we as benefits people, we are here on the best and worst day of your life. And it's not just infertility. It's when you find out your son has a brain cancer. So we are there to support you in multiple ways. And that's why people will come to me or Tammy and say, I don't know what to do. And they don't generally have to give us a lot of personal private information, but just know that who we are in this space, not just because of the law. Before HIPAA came along, I didn't know anybody who would violate the confidence of someone who came into my office looking for help or sharing some problem. It's no one else's business.
Thank you. I love this next question because it's something that we've kind of touched on a little bit, but I'd love to go a little deeper on it, which is, can we talk about how HR departments or insurance companies can change or have already started to change the language used around parental and fertility status? Things like men and women and male, female, moving toward people with uteruses, people with sperm, those kinds of things, or other elements of language that you find important to kind of clarify.
Note that I would drop in is I think that a lot of employers, like ones that Alita and I work for, have been really advocating for this. I'm sure the carrots of the world have been too. And it's, they have been, really, in the past, very abrasive and not inclusive, as we pointed out before. But I think, even for me, we've spent a lot of space in the transgender, arena, and we had always offered up like the standard benefits, but it really takes you as an employer to be aggressive, to say, I want to know what else is going on here. What else should we be doing for this population? And making them kind of come to the table to show you what's out there. And simple things like going out to their website and typing in gender dysphoria to see if it actually pops up and tells you who the providers are. It's telling. You have to do your homework, and I think really, and call them out on it when you see things.
Any other thoughts on language? I just want to make sure we give everyone a chance.
I think the other thing's the language is evolving. So don't get hung up on the language. Just look for what the outcome is. Because I can tell you there's a lot of people who are doing their best that just can't figure out the right words, and they don't want to offend someone. So I would say when it comes to language, assume positive intent and go from there.
I think we have time for one more very quick question, although it's not one we can answer thoroughly in a quick way, but we'll do our best. What are your thoughts around equity and advocacy for families and employees that are lower income that are seeking fertility support?
I think it goes back to providing an equitable solution for your employees. And, I think as employers are looking at what benefits to offer and also what's financially viable within their organization from an offering perspective, I think it's taking into account the full demographic of employees. And that's looking at it from an inclusivity perspective of age, race, sexual orientation, marital status, geography, and then also financial status, and looking across all of those different elements and driving to a benefit that is going to be most equitable.
Just leaving a pause in case anyone else wanted to jump in before we wrap. Okay, I think I'm gonna throw it back to Steve to help wrap us up.
Okay, thank you, Anna, and to our speakers. That was a really thoughtful and candid and timely conversation. Thanks again to our sponsor, Carrot, and to all of you for participating today and asking such excellent questions. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. I'll mention a few of them. Thursday, March 31st, we'll be talking about ensuring women's career growth and retention in the new work environment. On Tuesday, April 5th, our topic will be addressing power, privilege, and racial equity in your organization. And then on Wednesday, April 6th, at our monthly virtual conference, we'll be talking about managing the human impact of digital transformation. So thanks, everyone. Stay well.